called up a friend of mine who often works out, and he works other people out. And I said to him, I said, hey man, this year, I really, really need to get back in shape. And he was like, Shaykh, what is this for? Are you going through a midlife crisis? And I was like, I was like, no, dude, I'm not going through a midlife crisis. I'm happy with my wife, who's like my Khadija, like the Prophet also had. I'm happy with my wife. I'm not looking for a second wife or anything. I said to him, I said, I have a specific reason why I want to get in shape. He said, are you getting ready for it? I was like, no, I'm not. Though we should all be ready to defend ourselves at all times. I said to him, I said, I miss my old days. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I miss my days of when I was in madrasa. And we used to stand, preparing for the month of Ramadan, we used to stand by reciting 4 or 5 juz in each rak'ah, so that we could prepare our Quran. And I said, now, you know, the old knees are starting to creak. And my legs and my feet start to hurt when I try to do this. Or when I'm reciting, and I'm reciting out loud, I'm running out of breath. And I said, I really need to get in shape so that I can stand longer with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan. Especially now that it's coming in the winter days. My God. We used to love the winter days in the month of Ramadan. Us students. Why? Because now you can stand alone, not in congregation or anything. We would do the Taraweeh thing. We would do the Qiyam al-Layl thing also for those that did it, for those that didn't do it. 2 different opinions. However, we would do the Taraweeh thing and we would stand, but that would be 30 juz. I mean, that would just be 1 juz, right? Or 1 1/4 juz or 1 1/2 juz, depending on when you're going to do the Khatam of the Quran. And some of us were doing the 20 rakahs, some did the 10 rakahs, some whose Quran wasn't that strong were doing the 8 rakahs or the 4 rakahs, whatever it was. The aspect of the recitation of the Quran is so beautiful. It is so enjoyable. And I used to remember when we used to stand and you're reading 4 or 5 juz and you're standing strong and you're enjoying it. And I said to him, I said, physically, I need to change in order for me to become that where I was in madrasa. Maybe I can't get to that stage where we were because you're strong when you're younger, but I said I want to still go back and I want to enjoy that aspect of where I'm enjoying reciting the Quran, standing for a long time. And for a lot of us, for those that don't understand the Quran, and I always tell people, and I've always said this throughout the times where I've always said that, look, you really, really need to learn the Arabic language so that if you know what the Arabic language means, you can understand and follow along with the Quran. But if you can't, what I was mentioning to the students last week was that you take the Quran and the recitation. At that time, there were 20 days left. And I said, read 1 1/2 juz every single day in Arabic. And then the 10 days of Ramadan, read the Arabic, also the English portion. Right? So that you can start to gel with the Quran and take 20 words from each of the rukn. There are stopping points. On average, there are 20 stopping points inside of 1 juz. Take 20 words for each one word per rukn, right? So that you can understand what the Imam is reciting. So if you hear a word like وَقَتَلَ دَاوُدَ جَالُوتَ, right? The second Jalut comes up, it's different from the other words. It will tell you that that's the story of David and Goliath, right? يَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَتِي الَّتِي أَنْعَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَأُوفُوا بِعَهْدِكُمْ وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ. Right? The second you hear 3 يَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, you already know that this is talking about the children of Israel and what they went through and what they were told and the hukms that they were given. And then قَالُوا ادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُبَيِّنْ لَنَا مَا لَوْنُهَا قَالَ إِنِّي. So when you know where it's talking about بَقَرَتُهَا, when you hear the word baqaratuha, and I'm only talking about the baqarah right now, you know that it's talking about, well, which cow should we slaughter? And that's the story of when someone had murdered someone and they wanted to find who had killed, and then they were told to slaughter, and the heifer and all this other stuff that it was said. You know exactly what the Imam is reciting, and now you can start to jive with the Quran. You can start to understand the Quran while the Taraweeh is going on. And spiritually, what that does is, that makes your heart more inclined to understanding what is taking place inside of Taraweeh. So your mind is not going anywhere, and if you've chosen one word, you're seeing that word in every 2 rak'ahs. So what does that do? It forces you to concentrate on the recitation of the Quran. And then what it does, so what I'd say is 20 days in Sha'ban, typically I say the whole month of Sha'ban, read the whole Quran, one juz in Arabic. But now you're down to how many days, what date of Sha'ban is this? 15th of Sha'ban. No, 17th of Sha'ban. You have 13 days. For those that read the Quran slowly, start the recitation from now and carry it on into Ramadan. Get a translation of the Quran so you're seeing the Arabic and the English side by side and start to read through it. And then for those that don't read the Arabic and can't read the Arabic, read the transliteration, which says the Arabic in the English language with the translation, and remember the words. That's the first thing we must do. Because as Muslims, many of us haven't even read the Quran from cover to cover in the language that we understand. And imagine that's your cheat sheet. That literally is, you know how they say, oh, I want a life hack? This is not a life hack. This is your algorithm for life and akhirah. It's literally given. And yet we don't go to it. But if I want to read a manual, or if I want to become a doctor, if I want to become an engineer, if I'm in an apprentice program, I will go through and I will read every single book. Why? To fill my stomach. So that the food, the physical being can be nourished. But the spiritual nourishment, we often forget about. And that's the mindset that each of us as Muslims need to get into. Can you imagine? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell them that I love them. Allah is saying, I love you. And because of the rights that Allah has given us, that you love Allah too. But how do we do that? So read the Quran in Arabic and in a language that you understand. That's number one. Number two, create a calendar. 30 days, 29 days. Actually, no, before we get into that. Number one, before going in and doing the spiritual thing, spiritually, we are going to have shaitan that is going to attack us right before the month of Ramadan, because shaitan gets tied up. Do not get engaged into arguments of the 3 moons or the 2 moons that apparently exist. If you go to a masjid, follow that masjid. Don't get into an aspect of, oh, you started Ramadan wrong and I started Ramadan correctly. Leave that burden to the ulama that made the decision on when they want to start Ramadan and not start Ramadan based off of the moon sighting or based on global sighting. Local or global. Stay away from the fitna. We are not a qawm, we are not an ummah that should have problems or hatred or any kind of animosity towards one another as Muslims. We are not an ummah like this. And if you feel that you're going to a masjid, go to every masjid. I never discourage anyone from going to any masjid. But if you go to a masjid and they're talking about this and that person's wrong and this person's wrong and we are right and we're the only ones that are right, and you feel uncomfortable in that, find another masjid. Don't let an environment destroy the spiritual essence of Ramadan. Because what was revealed in the month of Ramadan? The Quran. The night of Laylatul Qadr, contrary to popular belief that it's on the 27th night, we don't know. We don't know if it's on the 27th night or not. We know that it's in the last 10 nights on the odd nights. Don't argue with anyone that, oh, it's on the 27th or it's not on the 27th. No, alhamdulillah. We as an ummah, that is our party time. And when I say party, this is halal party. We should be rocking up to the masjid and we should be ready to make salah and stand in front of Allah from the time that the sun goes down هِيَ حَتَّى مَطْلَعِ الْفَجْرِ. All the way till the time of Fajr. Because that's the time when the malaikas come down and they say salam. And they seek out gatherings and individuals and people that are worshipping Allah just to say salam. And imagine an angel coming and saying, may peace be upon you. These are angels that are, their only job is to obey and be obedient to Allah. And the only job that night that they have is to seek out people that are worshipping Allah and to say, peace be upon you. From who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now, number 2. Create a calendar. And based off of that calendar, you need to write down the activities that you plan to do every single day. Every single day. When I talk about activities, I'm talking about your ibadah, because we're in the spiritual section. We'll get to the physical section, we'll get to the food section, we'll get to the community section, and the family section, because those are your 4 sections that you need to be in. But in the spiritual stage, what you need to do is write down on a calendar your to-dos. Block out. If you're using a calendar, and I'm not promoting any kind of calendars or anything, but if you're using some of these AI calendars where it's like motion and things like that, put it in, put a time block in. Don't take away the rights of your employer, right? But in your free time, put in a time block that I'm going to read the Quran for an hour. And in that hour, I am planning to achieve finishing 1 juz or 1.5 juz. If you're slow in reading, maybe half, whatever it is, I am going to recite the Quran 1 hour before going to work. Then inside of the actual calendar, write down when I come home from work, because you're not, and even during lunchtime, what am I planning on doing during lunchtime? You have 30 minutes of lunch. That's what legally you should be having. So in that time, after I pray my salah, am I going to pray extra after my sunnah? Am I going to pray extra nawafil? Am I going to read the Quran more? Am I going to do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more? And when I say dhikr, I'm talking about taking it the spirit where you say subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanallah al-azim. What am I going to do during that lunch break? Maximize. After you come home, what am I going to do? Am I going to do Qaylullah? Am I going to rest? Or you can rest during that time at Dhuhr time, where during lunch break you could take a quick power nap for 20 minutes. Why? Because you're preparing for you to come to Tarawih, so that you can stay longer in Tarawih, right? So then when you come home, what am I going to do when I come home? Dads, moms, your kids come home at around 3:30 or 4. This is where you do a time block, where you sit with your children and you read the Quran with your children. And you go through, or if you don't have children, you block out time to read the English translation, or whatever language you are in. If you don't understand the Arabic language, the translation of what is going to be read in Tarawih that night. And this will force a connection. I'm sorry, I'm about to put you under the bus. But this should create a connection with you and the imam that is leading the Tarawih, where you go to him, bother him. Sorry. But bother him. I'm like, oh, what? But bother him and just say, hey, by the way, what are you reading from where to where tomorrow? That's all. Or, Wanana, on your group, on your WhatsApp groups, publish it. From on day 1, on day 2, we're going to be reading from this ayah to this ayah, this ayah to this ayah, this ayah to this ayah. Publish it. So that you can get prepared to follow along with the Quran. That's when you get home. Then, the next thing that you need to do, because now you've got Asr Salah, try to get Asr Salah inside of the masjid. If you can't get Asr Salah inside of the masjid, try to make Maghrib Salah inside of the masjid. Now I know some brothers, they get tired, like, oh man, you go through a whole feast, and then the Maghrib Salah is done, and then I've got to go home, get ready, and then come back. Try to see how you can maximize your time in going to the actual masjid, right? And praying your salah. And once you've prayed your salah, from Maghrib to Isha, write down, after eating, what am I going to do to get in the zone? for Tarawih. The mindset has to be there. How can I get in the zone? Create a connection with Allah through the Quran. Then, after Tarawih, am I going to hang out and just chill out and just talk to people? Am I going to go outside of the masjid and talk to people? Or am I going to now switch into physical ibadah mode? When I go home, am I going to go home and pray an extra 2 rakahs or 4 rakahs? Will I do that with my children? If you're married and you don't have children, am I going to do that with my wife? Am I going to engage in the Quran and in ibadah with my wife, with my family, with my children, with my brothers, with my sisters? Make the home alive with the ibadah of Allah. That's in terms of your spiritual connection. And do that every single day for the next 30 days that are coming up in the month of Ramadan. Then the second thing I want you to do is I want you to think about the major sins that you have committed. Don't write them down if you don't want to write them down in case someone else sees them. But if you're comfortable with writing it down and you have a private area where you can write it down, and by the way, for those of you that are going to put it on and email it to yourself, Shaykh Google will read it. But what I'm saying is, write down the sins that are major. And then write down what type of forgiveness you want for the sins that you have committed. And then schedule in time for dua. And I want to do this. And then schedule in and write down the things that you want Allah to accept from you, that you want Allah to bless you with, that you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the future to help you with. Whatever difficulties you're going through, write down the du'as so that you can keep making the du'as. But brothers and sisters, and this is part of the community aspect, do not forget our brothers and sisters around the world and learn to start becoming selfless in the month of Ramadan. Learn to become selfless in the month of Ramadan. The next aspect that you need to start scheduling, so schedule in dua time. After every salah, what dua do I want to make? If I want to do a finishing of the recitation of the Quran, after every salah, if you're to read 5 pages after every salah, you'll do a khatimah. Because you'll be finishing 1 juz every single day if you read 5 pages. It's only 5 pages. Every single day, after every salah, you will finish the recitation of the Quran. Then what you want to do after you've scheduled in how to make dua and what to make dua about, the fourth thing that I want you to do is I want you to take the knowledge in which you want to gain. So Islam has many sciences and many aspects. And many of us, let me give you one tip. Many of us, what do we give out in the month of Ramadan? What do we do that's done on a yearly basis that's a farad? Zakat. Right? Start to calculate your zakat and start to gain knowledge on what are the principles of having to give zakat. Okay? I'm going to ask you guys, are you ready? With zakat, what do you have to give? What's the amount that you have to give in zakat?
2.5%.
2.5% of what?
Your saving.
Your savings?
Oh, your wealth.
Your wealth? Okay.
Above.
You were at my class, dude. You better give this direct. I just gave it to you this Wednesday.
Savings for 1 year.
Savings for?
1 year.
1 year?
Above the threshold.
Above the? Of the threshold of? What is the threshold called? Nisab. Okay. What is the threshold of nisab in gold and silver?
80 grams of gold.
83.
83 grams of?
Gold.
Is it 83, 85, or 87? 87 on one, 85 on another one. That is 80 of what? Gold or silver?
Gold.
Gold. Okay. What about silver? How many? 100 and?
612.36.
Huh?
612.36.
600 and?
12.36.
No, you're not allowed that. Just not. You're not. You just gave it. So ulama or Maulana Rizwan and Maulana Hamza, you are disqualified from answering these questions. Because I was like, wow, he does know the answer. I was shocked until I saw it was. Okay, so what does that equal to? What does the gold equal to?
5,000.
Hmm?
The gold is like
Changes on the day.
It changes on a daily basis, right? So you have to check what that is. And it's roughly between 5,000 to 6,000. Right now it's at 6,000, I checked it. And then the Hanafi scholars and the Maliki scholars say, and the majority of the scholars say, look, if we go to the gold threshold, not many people are going to be able to give zakah. If we go to the silver threshold, a lot more people will be able to give zakah, and a lot less people will be qualified to gain zakah. Now,
at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, were those two
those
quantities
two,
worth
the
the same?
quantity, this is what it was, they were the same. Because they were used as a means of monetary system. Unfortunately, now we just print money, or someone prints money, and we don't even know what it's pegged to. Then you had silver, right? And silver equals how much, roughly?
Around 460 pounds.
460 pounds, around that, right? Well, it fluctuates, right? So if you have above 460 pounds or 500 pounds, let's just say between 400 and 500 pounds, that you have saved, and that saving has been there for the whole year, and your anniversary date is X date, you need to learn based off of what calculation, and is it just cash? Is it based off of just cash?
Everything that you own.
Assets.
Everything that you own?
Depends on the month.
Wow.
Depends.
Depends?
Depends on the month.
Huh? No. So what are the basics?
It's an asset, so like things that have value and can grow in value.
It's an asset and things that have value that can grow in value. So if I've invested in a company, do I have to pay zakat on that company?
Yes.
Actually, when you get revenue from it.
If you get revenue from it?
When you sell the shares, for example, of that,
Mm-hmm.
then it became.
But if I've got shares in it, do I pay in the shares?
Yeah, but that wealth is not. I mean, it's kind of virtual technically. So you know what I mean? It's like how are you gonna take from it? Because again, for example, in your bank account, you don't have enough to cover that.
Okay.
Because it gives also the question, for example, sorry, but it gives also the question, for example, when you give gold as a mahar to your wife, for example,
Mhm.
so, and it's a certain amount.
So if you give gold,
So your
I'm
wife
sorry,
should-
so the sisters can hear. So
Yeah.
the brother is saying that if you give gold as mahar to your wife,
Or gift.
Or gift to your wife, no.
No, gift. But then your wife will have it, right, for a certain period, and it's gonna exceed one.
then your wife will have it and it will
Should
exceed.
she pay zakat